Are you there, Oscar?
I'm here.
All right, man. You got a hand for us here?
Yes, so this is a hand played at a home game in Tennessee. So there's no casinos in Tennessee, so it's all home games. Um,
Where are you from?
well, I know I sound like Euro, so I live in Tennessee now, but I was born and raised in Germany.
All right, so this is a 2-5 home game, right?
It's a 1-3 home game, but it's
Oh, 1-3.
uncapped.
Okay, 1-3.
So depending on who's playing, sometimes average stack is 200, sometimes average stack
Mm-hmm.
is 1,000 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And they generally allow like Mississippi straddles from everywhere, which some of the Omega whales really use to their, well, ultimately disadvantage. So sometimes the big game just becomes huge.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not one of these games. So it's an unstraddled hand,
I want to say
10-handed.
too, there's a city in Tennessee called Knoxville. I know that there's one in Kentucky, but there's Knoxville in
Yeah, this
Tennessee,
is
right?
this is in Knoxville. This is in
Oh, okay.
Knoxville.
Because I was just gonna say I met some people from Knoxville that would go to Cherokee. It's not that far away, right? Two and a half,
Right. It's
two
it's like a
hours.
2-hour drive,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
very very scenic, very nice drive.
Yep. Yeah, it was. Coming from the other way in Nashville too. Okay, so 1-3 home game, Knoxville area in Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a 10-handed, 9 or 10-handed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's two limbs.
How deep are you guys, by the way?
Oh yeah, so me and the main villain are about 1,000 effective.
Okay, so it's a pretty deep thing. Okay,
Yes.
so 2 limps. Okay.
So two limbs
Mm-hmm.
to hero in the cutoff. I
Mm-hmm.
have Ace of Clubs, King of Spades,
Ace of
and
clubs, ace of club, king of spades. Okay. Yep.
I open over two limpers to 20, which is a fairly standard size.
What do people usually just straight opening to? 15?
The most common opening size is a limp in these games.
When
I
somebody
I
raises.
I usually open to 12 if there's no limpers in front
Uh-huh.
of me, and I guess that's what most people do around that
Okay. All right. So
10, 10 to
you're kind of
15.
adding the limps to the
Right,
normal open
that's
size. Okay.
generally what I do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I open to 20, and Villain, who is a clearly capable player, one of the better players in that whole pool, but I haven't played with him a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
is on the button, and he calls, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the limpers calls.
So button calls, somewhat of a regular, and one limper from up front calls.
Yeah, and
So
then pot is about 60.
okay. So pot $60. Okay.
All right, so the flop is King of Hearts,
Mm-hmm.
Jack of Diamonds,
Mm-hmm.
Seven of Spades,
Okay. So you flop top pair. Okay.
right?
Yep.
The limper, out of position limper, original limper checks to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I bet 35, just above half pot.
So hero bets 35. King of Hearts, Jack of Diamonds, Seven of Spades. It is a rainbow board. We do like to sort of preach sizing up a bit onto Broadway boards. And again, I go back to another thing that we teach on Crossline Poker, which is the smaller the pot size, the larger you can get away with betting. Well, a small stakes exploit is that it's bet sizing in live poker is more about absolute value, absolute bet size as opposed to percentage of the pot. So what I mean by that is that people don't interpret if you were to bet 50 or 60 as, oh my God, there's a pot size bet when the pot is small. And then on the flip side to that, as the pot gets bigger and bigger, it turns the opposite. Where if you bet 600 into a $1,200 pot at 1-3, that's not like a half pot size bet strength. That's a $600 bet. The reason why I bring that up is just because as the pot is smaller, you can get away with betting a little bit more. I would probably tend to size up here to probably 45 or even 50. It's just something a little bit subtle. I don't see people folding jacks here in a Tennessee home game.
Right,
But
right. So I totally see that.
mhm.
I was thinking about the sizing there. I remember that. I didn't want to go too big because, first of all, it's multi-way, and maybe I can get both of them to string along because if somebody limps from under the gun or whatever it was, there's a good chance they might overcall with absolute trash there. And on the other hand, it's a kind of wet board, but if it had like a flush draw on it, I would definitely go bigger with my ace king. But like this, I went just above half pot.
Okay, so 35. Yep.
And the button calls,
Mhm.
main villain and the button calls, and the original limper folds. So pot is about 130 now, and I'm out of position versus button.
So 130. Again, I'll point out next to act caller, flop configuration, flop call configuration should be a little bit stronger. I'm not saying that people aren't going to call with a jack on the button, but this should be a little bit stronger. Like it's not, it shouldn't be like 7-8, where sometimes you'll see that limper if he was closing the action, like piece off with a pair, right? Just
Right.
something of note. So 130, okay, to the turn.
Okay, so the turn is a total break. It's the three of clubs.
Okay, so King Jack 7-3, rainbow.
Um, exactly. And now, so pot is 130. I bet 85.
Okay, so hero because you're out of position. Hero bets 85. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
I bet 85 and villain calls.
Button calls.
And
Now
now
the pot is 300.
300, right?
Yep.
So basically on the turn, I'm kind of targeting like king, queen, king 10, ace, jack, and of course like the draw queen 10 for kind of value. And I kind of discount like jack, jack, 7, 7 at this point because I would expect them to partially, well, jack, jack at least to 3-bet pre.
Yep.
And I don't really think, 7, 7 would at least start raising on the flop at that point.
Well, so I mean, even in this game, you're going to see jacks probably 3-bet pre-flop here, right? You would think.
That was my strong assumption in this point, even though I did look it up, that spot in your app, in the Soft for Life app, and there jacks are actually a 50% 3-bet, 50% call. So maybe
is that accounting for 2 limps from up front? I see Nate in the live chat here, or he was in the live chat. I don't know if that's accounting for a couple limps in front. And again,
No.
that's, sometimes you'll see in really, really kind of games where the players are really bad. You want to bring people in with dominated hands. And I've talked about this on Hustler Live. We saw our buddy Mark Goon, a content creator, do a lot of flatting with hands like ace, king, ace, queen to keep a lot of dominated aces in. Jacks are kind of a weird one out of that configuration. But, I would still expect a guy mostly to 3-bet jack jack. But okay, so it's 300 here. King jack 7-3. Okay, now onto the river.
Complete rainbow, and the river is the king of diamonds.
So king of diamonds, and obviously you make trips, right?
I
Best
make
kicker.
top trips with top kicker. And I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is, I mean, this is a huge value spot for me, right? There's plenty of KX left in villain's range. King Jack maybe gets here like this, that beats me now, but Jack should have 3-bet pre, at least that's what I thought in that moment. 7s should have raised on the flop or at the very latest on the turn because they want to, if I have the draw, they want to charge me. So there's not all that much that I have to be afraid of. So immediately I'm thinking, well, I can bet here for value. But then, like the little Bart Hansen angel on my shoulder shows up and says, well, this is exactly the kind of spot that I believe you are preaching, is where for the one time in your life you can check to check call because it's trips.
Yeah, and I remember you saying that from the email, and I'll kind of explain what I was talking about. You are slightly misinterpreting what I was saying, and I don't know if this comes out of small stakes exploits, but when I was talking about how I don't like to check call, I always give this example where there are certain times that you can do it, and it's usually when you make trips with a weak kicker. Like when you are leading out of the blind, like in a limp pot. Or, for example, let's say instead of you had ace king here, you might have king 9 or something like that. Although I think this is still a little bit of a different setup, because really I think what you really need to zoom in here is that how often will Jack X hero you here. But in the example that I use, sometimes in limp pots you lead out with top pair. I mean, I'm a big advocate of that. You'll get a free look at a hand, and the board might have like 9-3, and it might be limped around 3 ways, and the board comes out 9-7 deuce with like a let me think of, let's say you had like 10 deuce, and the board came out like 10 deuce 4 with a flush draw, or 10-3-4 with a flush draw, and you let out, right? And you got one caller on 10-3-4, and then the turn was a 9, and you didn't want to give the guy a free card, and you bet out again, and he called, and then the river was a 10, so it's 10-3-4 9-10, and you have 10 deuce. That's a good spot to check the river, because, and the reason why I advocate checking, especially when the turn brings a disconnected overcard to second pair, like a 9, is because there are so few people that take that line. You give your opponent the green light to bluff, because it's just not something that's done in live poker where someone's actually going to take trips and check it. So if they busted a flush draw, that will actually give them the green light to bet, because so few people will ever check trips. Your hand is different, though, because of the fact that looking at Jack X hero you here, now you said there's a lot of kings left. It's interesting how I'm going to assume that all king queen offs call in a home game. If king queen off did not call, now this is cutoff versus button, so king queen probably is a call. You can count the combinations, right? There are 3 kings accounted for. So there's only 1 king left. So, 4 combos of king queen, suited and offsuit, whether or not he 3-bets the king queen suited. I don't know if he gets here with king jack like the whole way. And there's not many. I mean, there's only, another 3 of that. And then is he calling king 10 off? And if he's not calling king 10 off, then there's really only 1 combo of king 10 suited. Now, maybe king 9 suited, but the fact of the matter is there might not be that many combos of king X when you look at this particular sort of situation. So, I mean, listen, I tend to bet here. I don't really screw around with ace king in a spot like this. I just kind of tend to go for it. You could make a case, though, that checking might induce bluffs from like queen 10 because nobody checks king X. And if you're going to get a king to bet anyways, you don't lose the value.
That is exactly my line of thinking.
Yeah, I would like it slightly better if there were a backdoor had come in and there was a front door flush draw. It just gives your opponent more draws to have that will want to bluff at it. And it would just really suck if he was going to call a bet with something that he checks behind. That's why I probably wouldn't screw around with trips top kicker on this hand where it's not all that draw heavy. But that's sort of the theory, is that if king X is going to bet anyways, and you also get the bluffs to bluff because you've checked trips when no one really does it, when they run into it, that's the theory. So from my perspective, I would still be doing a lot of betting, but I just wanted to sort of clear that up.
That's great, and also make me understand better what you really meant. I think you explained it like this from the very beginning with the trips, but this is what came to my mind, and this is why I also sent it in. So I was thinking very similar to what you said, is basically, I guess that villain is capable of bluffing here with queen 10, since I do show some weakness, and I think I don't lose any value from the king X because none of them will call behind because none of them will check behind.
None of them will check behind. Right, yeah.
So I decided, it took me quite a while. I must have tanked for at least half a minute, which is fairly long for that game. And I decide to check and then basically call any bet unless it's like a double pot over bet.
Well, I don't think you could ever fold to any bet. Because it's so bizarre. I mean, the problem, the reason why you can never fold to any bet here is, I don't know. I mean, caliber of player, but you're making it look like you don't have a king. So why someone would ever go 3x the pot with 7s full when you're saying I don't have a king would be bizarre and would make me want to call even more, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, that is true. But my thinking was, my kind of decision in that moment was, I will check and I will call any bet, and if it's an all in for 2 times pot, well, then I might have to reconsider. But let's think about that when I get there. So I check, and villain bets 250 into a pot of 300 very, very quickly. But had a lot.
I think that's big enough. I think that's big enough. Where, here's the thing: like you could look at this. So you're playing 1,000 effective. So there's going to be, you've already put in like 400 so there's going to be 600 left after the call. You can just look at the math of this and just, here's the thing. Like you could look at this spot and say, if I check raise all in and he will call with any unfull king, and you actually had a decent sort of handle on what his pre-flop range is here, cutoff versus button, you could look at this and say, all right, well, if he's going to call with any unfull king, does he have more unfull kings than, say, boats and bluffs? Because you don't care. Remember, the bluffs are bad for you here too, to check raise all in, because you're not getting anything out of them, right? So if he has less unfull kings than hands that beat you plus bluffs, then it's just a call, right?
Right. So that was my thinking. I never even considered raising here. So my plan was to check call anything. I got a bet of 250 into 300, and I snap called. And villain has Jack, which is the reason why I looked up Jack as button versus cutoff afterwards, because I thought, isn't that a hand that should really raise flop or at the very latest turn?
Well, I see that.
I don't know about turn.
Yeah, sorry. I see that Nate is in the live chat, and I see some other people say that Solve for Live does have a good chunk of flatting. Cutoff versus button. I thought off the cuff. I don't really play by charts. You know what I'm saying? Myself personally, charts are a guide. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but I can kind of see. And I don't know the charts necessarily off the top of my head, but I could see the reasons for it. But yeah, that is a little bit surprising that he shows up with Jack Jack. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I assume that he was going to raise you if you bet the river, right? At some
Yeah,
point, Jesus
I
Christ.
strongly assume that. Yes.
So, anyways, thanks for the call. I appreciate it.